Okay, imagine this. One day, you sit down to work or study, fire up a piece of software you absolutely rely on. Maybe it's for, I don't know, complex simulations, heavy data analysis, engineering design, whatever it is, and it's just inaccessible.
Yeah.
Completely gone. That's not some hypothetical scenario. It's exactly what millions of engineers, scientists, and students faced recently with a company known globally for its mathematical computing and simulation tools, MathWorks.
It's a really stark, real-world demonstration of how much we depend on these digital tools.
Yeah.
Even in these highly specialized professional fields.
Totally.
And when that foundation is suddenly shaken,
Yeah.
the ripple effects are, well, immediate and pretty widespread.
Absolutely. And that's the core of our deep dive today. Our mission is to unpack the details of this significant cyber incident that hit MathWorks, exploring what happened, the wide-ranging impact it had on users, and what this specific event can teach us about the modern threat landscape, particularly their relentless rise of ransomware.
Right. Looking at the nuts and bolts, but also the bigger picture.
Exactly. What does it all mean? And this deep dive, focused on understanding digital resilience in the face of attack, is brought to you by Stonefly. They're a leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. So if you're looking for secure, ransomware-proof storage, Stonefly sells air-gapped and immutable storage designed to keep your critical data safe. You can contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. So, okay, let's dig into the timeline. Where did this all begin?
It started quietly enough, actually, on Sunday, May 18th. If you check the MathWorks status page back then, the updates were, well, pretty vague initially.
Okay.
Just mentioning an issue affecting multiple applications. There wasn't immediate clarity on, the actual cause.
And that lack of clarity seemed to hang around for a bit, right? For days, updates were kind of similar, continuing to investigate, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It wasn't until much later, we're talking maybe around May 26th or 27th, that the company explicitly confirmed the cause.
Yeah.
A ransomware attack.
Wow, quite a delay.
It was. And they stated they had notified federal law enforcement at that point, too.
So let's just be clear. A ransomware attack hit their IT systems,
That's right.
taking down not just online applications used by customers, but also critical internal systems that their own staff relied on.
Exactly. It wasn't just some technical glitch. It was a deliberate, malicious act.
And the scope of the impact sounds massive. This wasn't confined to one small corner of their operations.
Oh, not at all. It affected a really wide array of critical services that users depend on every single day.
Like what specifically?
Well, we're talking their cloud center, the file exchange, which is huge for sharing code and projects the absolutely crucial license center.
Oof, yeah.
The online store, account systems needed for login. I mean, many of these were either completely down or severely degraded for a while.
Think about the license center being down for so many users. That's the gatekeeper, right? That's how you even use the software you've legitimately paid for.
Precisely. That's a major choke point. Now, while MathWorks did start bringing some systems back online, they had cybersecurity experts helping, but the recovery was definitely a phased approach. It wasn't a quick flip of a switch.
Right. You saw updates trickling out.
Yeah, we saw that core login services like SSO and multi-factor authentication were restored relatively quickly, maybe by May 21st. That helped alleviate some access issues. People could at least sign on in some cases.
Okay, so some progress.
Some. And then MATLAB Online and mobile came back around May 23rd.
But even as we got towards the end of May, many key services were still struggling.
Oh, yeah. Downloads were listed as being in an outage state, meaning you couldn't even get the software onto your machine easily if you needed a fresh install.
Which, if you're trying to work around the problem, is a big deal.
Huge. The License Center remained a major outage, really crippling activation and license management. File Exchange was technically back, but kind of hobbled missing features like file viewing or the ability to sync with GitHub. Still problematic.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The impact wasn't uniform across the board, was it?
No, that's the key point. It wasn't a flat line across all users at all. If you were, say, a large commercial customer, maybe running an older version installed locally and critically, hosting your own license server internally,
Okay.
you might have been largely unaffected, or at least much less affected. But if you relied heavily on the online services, particularly in the educational space.
Like students, universities.
Exactly, where MATLAB Online is very widely used.
Yeah.
For them, the disruption was immense, significant problems.
You can just feel the user frustration there, especially, I mean, the timing. This apparently coincided with exam and thesis season for a lot of students.
Oh, terrible timing.
Imagine being totally dependent on MATLAB Online to finish a critical assignment or submit your thesis, and suddenly you lose access because some licensed server miles away is down.
We absolutely saw that frustration boiling over online. Users reported just immense difficulties logging in, trying to find lost passwords, or critically, getting new installations licensed on different machines just to try and find some way to work around the outage.
That dependency on the central licensing system really became a major, major choke point.
It absolutely did.
And some users pointed out something else interesting, the contrast between how big this impact felt to them and the, let's say, relative lack of mainstream media coverage compared to outages at giants like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure.
Yeah, that came up.
It made some wonder, was it because MathWorks serves a more niche, albeit critical market? Or perhaps were they just very effective at managing the public narrative? Hard to say.
It is. And the material we looked at even highlighted users actively discussing and implementing workarounds, which is fascinating in itself.
Like what?
Well, for those with installed versions, some found success apparently by just disconnecting their machines from the internet.
Ah, to bypass the online license checks.
Exactly, because those checks were failing due to the server outage. It really throws a spotlight on how potentially fragile these online licensing models can be when the infrastructure supporting them goes down.
It really does. And in some extreme cases, I mean, faced with deadlines they just couldn't possibly meet otherwise, some users reportedly resorted to pirating the software.
Get out. Really?
Yeah. Despite having legitimate licenses, they simply couldn't activate. That's a pretty drastic measure, isn't it?
It is. It really speaks to the critical role these tools play. I mean, the sheer desperation caused by that lack of access.
Absolutely raises an important question about, service delivery and user reliance when these kinds of attacks happen.
And there were also, understandably, valid concerns from users about potential data compromise.
Right, like personal info or data stored in MATLAB Online itself.
Exactly. Were personal emails, work emails, or data stored in MATLAB Online affected? The information we have doesn't confirm any data theft occurred, but it also only tells us the company hasn't publicly disclosed that detail yet. So, still an open question for many.
Okay, so stepping back a bit, this MathWorks incident didn't happen in a vacuum. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's unfortunately part of this rapidly escalating trend we keep hearing about.
Oh, definitely. Ransomware attacks are not just increasing in number, they're also getting more sophisticated.
There was one report we saw that painted a really stark picture.
Yeah, I think I saw that one too. Mentioning that ransomware was a factor in nearly half of over 12,000 confirmed data breaches in 2024 alone.
Wow, half. That number is just staggering. It really shows how pervasive this threat has become.
It's everywhere.
So given that context, what does the MathWorks incident specifically tell us about vulnerability? I mean, this is a specialized software company serving a very specific, highly technical user base. Does that make them a more or less attractive target? What unique challenges might they face compared to, say, a big retail company?
That's a great question. And while, sure, many attack vectors are common across the board, phishing attacks, systems that aren't patched, weak authentication, attackers managing to move laterally through networks undetected.
The usual suspects.
Right, the usual suspects. But this incident really underscores that companies serving these niche but absolutely critical professional fields are definitely in the crosshairs.
So they're not immune just because they're specialized?
Not at all. The value to the attacker might be less about, say, mass consumer credit card data and more about disrupting critical industry workflows or maybe accessing proprietary technical information, though, we don't have specifics on the motives here.
Right.
And also the complexity of recovering these highly specialized software systems, which maybe is reflected in that phased recovery we saw, that could also present unique challenges compared to maybe restoring more generic IT infrastructure.
That phased recovery is telling, isn't it? It kind of hints at the deep roots these systems have within their operations and the difficulty of untangling and restoring them after a significant hit.
Mm-hmm.
And while MathWorks did engage federal law enforcement and external experts quickly, The fact remains that even a well-established, specialized company like this was successfully targeted and, well, severely impacted.
It shows no one is really safe.
Hmm.
And as you mentioned earlier, we still don't know if a ransom was paid, if negotiations are ongoing, or even which specific ransomware group was behind it. No group had publicly claimed the attack, as in the latest reports we've seen.
Right, that mystery just adds another layer to the whole thing.
It does.
So, pulling it all together then, what does this deep dive into the MathWorks incident really mean for you, the listener?
Well, firstly, I think it shows just how far-reaching the consequences of a cyber attack on a single critical software provider can actually be. It really does impact potentially millions of users across vital sectors like engineering, science, education. It highlights our interconnectedness and deep reliance on these digital tools.
It also starkly illustrates the ongoing battle that companies face against these sophisticated cyber threats like ransomware. It's clearly not just about preventing attacks entirely, which seems incredibly difficult, maybe impossible.
Yeah, probably impossible.
It's also about having robust, tested, and genuinely resilient recovery plans in place to minimize that downtime and impact when, maybe not if, but when the inevitable happens.
Absolutely. And finally, I think it forces us all to confront our own dependency on digital tools, and particularly online services, for fundamental tasks. I mean, when that access is suddenly taken away, whether it's for your work, your study, your research, the consequences are very real and very immediate.
We've taken a deep dive today into the MathWorks ransomware incident. We looked at the timeline from those first vague reports right through to the confirmation of the attack. We examined the specific services that were crippled, heard about the very real impact on users caught right in the middle, and discussed what this tells us about the wider threat landscape facing specialized software companies and, frankly, all of us users today.
So why should you care? Because these cyber threats, they aren't just abstract headlines about big corporations anymore. They can directly impact the actual tools you use every single day to do your job, pursue your education, or conduct your research. Understanding these events helps us all appreciate the critical importance of digital resilience, both for the companies providing these essential services and, honestly, for ourselves as users, just trying to navigate this digital world.
Okay, so consider this provocative thought as we wrap up this deep dive. In a world where increasingly specialized and, frankly, fundamental tasks rely so heavily on interconnected software tools, how can we design systems and maybe even our own workflows to ensure critical functions can continue or at least be rapidly restored, even when the providers of those essential tools are under cyber attack? Something to think about. This deep dive was brought to you by Stonefly, a leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. If you're looking for secure, ransomware-proof storage, remember, Stonefly sells air-gapped and immutable storage. Contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo.